But we know nothing about this lagoon.
I can tell you something about this place. My boys call it the Black Lagoon, the paradise. Only they say nobody has ever come back to prove it. We'll do it.
What if I told you that the last great universal monster wasn't born in a Gothic castle or a mad scientist's lab, but deep beneath the shimmering black surface of a forgotten lagoon? In 1954, Universal Pictures, the studio that had built its empire on the backs of Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman, unleashed a new and terrifying nightmare on an unsuspecting public. Creature from the Black Lagoon terrified audiences with something they had never seen before. A monster that wasn't dead, undead, or from another planet, but was instead something terrifyingly real. Alive, primitive, strangely beautiful, and heartbreakingly, profoundly lonely. Shot in stunning immersive 3D, sculpted in secrecy by a forgotten female artistic genius, and inspired by a strange and ghostly myth told at a Hollywood dinner party. This film became one of the most haunting and influential horror stories of the entire atomic age. But behind every shimmering and beautiful underwater scene, there were near drownings, lost credits, artistic betrayals, and production legends that would go on to shape generations of filmmakers. So, grab your oxygen tank, hold your breath, and dive with me into the murky depths of 16 wild and true stories behind the making of Creature from the Black Lagoon. Because what lurked under that dark surface wasn't just a monster. It was the very future of horror itself. The Creature had two actors, not one. A tale of two men. One monster, two men. That is the fundamental and brilliant secret behind the Gill-man's haunting and seamless realism. On land, the Creature was played by the towering and physically imposing actor Ben Chapman, who stood at a menacing 6'5". He was the man responsible for the Creature's slow, powerful, and lumbering movements through the lagoon's muddy, jungle-like sets. His performance was a feat of pure endurance, trapped for hours under layers of heavy, suffocating latex in the blistering California heat, a condition so intense it left him dangerously dehydrated by midday. But the moment the Creature slipped into the water, everything changed. Underwater, the Creature was magically and gracefully brought to life by a completely different man. Ricou Browning, a professional diver, champion swimmer, and all-around aquatic expert from Florida. His smooth, weightless, and almost balletic movements turned what could have been a clumsy monster chase into a scene of hypnotic, otherworldly beauty. Browning, a true master of his craft, could hold his breath for nearly 4 minutes, long enough to glide silently and effortlessly past the camera without any breathing apparatus, giving the powerful and unforgettable illusion of an aquatic being that didn't need to breathe at all. What makes this dual performance so fascinating and so technically effective is how perfectly and seamlessly their two completely different styles blended together, so much so that, for decades, audiences believed it was a single gifted actor. Chapman's slow, menacing gait on land gave the Creature a sense of raw, brute, and terrifying power, while Browning's fluid and graceful underwater choreography gave him a strange and haunting alien elegance. Two completely different styles, stitched together so seamlessly that audiences believed they were witnessing one single, amphibious creature, effortlessly moving between two worlds. In truth, it was two men, risking heat exhaustion and underwater blackouts, just to make a movie monster feel terrifyingly real. The iconic poster was painted by a B-movie legend before audiences even saw the Creature rise from the murky water for the first time. They were already completely and utterly hooked by a single, unforgettable, and terrifying image. The theatrical poster for Creature from the Black Lagoon remains, to this day, one of the most recognizable and celebrated pieces of artwork in the entire history of the horror genre. The image is iconic and perfect. The Gill-man, his scales glistening and his powerful, webbed hands outstretched, clutching a screaming, helpless woman in a pristine white bathing suit. as bubbles swirl through a dark and menacing emerald abyss. That unforgettable and influential artwork came from the brilliant brush of Reynold Brown, a young and talented illustrator who would go on to define the entire visual look of 1950s science fiction and B-movie horror. Brown's bold and dynamic brushwork gave Universal's aging and increasingly quaint monsters their teeth again, transforming what were often pulpy, low-budget horror stories into grand, colorful pop art myths. What makes this particular poster so special and so enduring isn't just the incredible artistic skill, it's the tone. Brown perfectly and masterfully captured the movie's central and most powerful contradiction, sheer, animalistic terror and a strange, almost tragic beauty, locked together forever in one desperate underwater embrace. His bold, vibrant colors and his exaggerated sense of motion made the creature seem both incredibly violent and strangely, almost sadly, romantic, perfectly echoing the film's powerful Beauty and the Beast undertones. It wasn't just marketing. It was powerful and effective storytelling, all captured in one single, frozen and unforgettable moment. Long before the first on-screen scream ever echoed in the theaters, Reynold Brown's brilliant artwork had already made the creature immortal. It became Universal's final great and most original monster icon. By the year 1954, Universal Studios' golden age of monsters, the era that had given the world Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman, was beginning to fade into memory. Dracula's elegant cape had lost its shadow. Frankenstein's monster's bolts were now more a source of nostalgia than true nightmare, and the Wolfman's howl echoed mostly on late-night television reruns. The studio that had literally built its empire on the backs of Gothic horror was in desperate need of a new, modern nightmare. Then, from the depths of the Amazon, a new and completely different kind of creature emerged. The Gill-man wasn't a myth from a European legend, a reanimated corpse from a lab, or a curse from a full moon. He was a living, breathing, and terrifying relic of evolution itself. A missing link, the last of his kind, dragged from the silent depths of prehistoric time to face the bright and violent modern world. This brilliant premise made him terrifying in a fresh and uniquely 1950s way. He wasn't supernatural. He felt disturbingly and chillingly possible. Audiences, tired of the old monsters, fell in love with the new creature instantly. Kids begged for Gill-man toys. Theaters sold out of the immersive 3D screenings. And critics hailed him as the perfect missing link between the classic horror of the past and the new atomic age science fiction of the future. He became the brilliant and unexpected bridge between two distinct eras of horror. He was, in effect, the very last of the original, iconic Universal monsters, a final brilliant creation that both closed one glorious era and began another, more scientific one. The creature's Amazonian boat scenes were actually shot on Universal's backlot lake. The film might take place deep in the steamy, remote, and dangerous jungles of the Amazon River, but many of its most iconic and deeply atmospheric river shots were actually filmed right in the middle of sunny, bustling Hollywood. Those famous and moody boat scenes with the tramp steamer, the Rita, gliding through a world of thick, oppressive mist and eerie, silvery moonlight, were all shot on a man-made body of water located on Universal's own studio backlot, a location known to studio employees as Park Lake. This was the same small, unassuming, and completely artificial lake that had, over the years, previously hosted Frankenstein's monster, the Invisible Man, and even the comedy duo Abbott and Costello. It was a quiet, unassuming patch of California that, with a little bit of classic movie magic, was repeatedly and convincingly transformed into the very edge of the unknown every single time the cameras rolled. The cinematographers for Creature from the Black Lagoon filled the small lake with thick, artificial fog pumped from machines, hung Spanish moss and fake jungle vines from massive, overhanging cranes, and shot from low. Clever angles to completely hide the studio walls and the surrounding, very un-Amazonian Hollywood hills. Between takes, the actors could literally step off the Amazonian steamer and walk straight into the studio parking lot for a coffee break. But on film, the brilliant and moody illusion worked perfectly. The deep dark shadows, the eerie reflections on the still black water, it all felt terrifying and authentically real. It was a perfect example of the now almost lost magic of old Hollywood, where a few clever tricks and some brilliant lighting could transport you 1,000 miles away from home. A tragic Beauty and the Beast. Heart beats inside the monster at its core, and this is the secret to its enduring power. Creature from the Black Lagoon isn't just another simple 1950s monster movie. It's a tragic and deeply poignant love story, doomed from the very start. Beneath the menacing reptilian scales and the fearsome primal snarls, the Gill-man isn't just hunting, he's reaching out. When he first rises from the inky depths and sees the beautiful scientist Kay Lawrence, played by the actress Julie Adams, swimming gracefully on the surface of his lagoon, something ancient and powerful inside him changes. The look in his wide, dark eyes isn't just hunger or territorial aggression. It's a deep and profound curiosity, and perhaps even a form of lonely, primal longing. The filmmakers, in a move that was surprisingly sophisticated for a B-movie of this era, deliberately and artfully wove a classic Beauty and the Beast theme into the very fabric of the story. They turned their monster into a lonely, isolated soul, the very last of his kind. A creature caught between his own violent, prehistoric instincts and a desperate, almost human, desire for connection that he can't possibly understand or articulate. That powerful and tragic emotional undercurrent is what made audiences remember him, and even sympathize with him long after the credits had rolled. He wasn't a mindless killing machine like Godzilla, or a simple one-dimensional symbol of science gone wrong. He was a creature yearning for a connection with a world that could only respond to his advances with guns, nets, and violence. The more he tried to reach the surface, the more violently the human world pushed him back down into the lonely depths. Ricou Browning's aquatic grace redefined how monsters move. On screen, most movie monsters of the 1950s would stomp, snarl, and crash through walls with a clumsy, almost comical brute force. But the Gill-man was different. Underwater, he glided. He moved with a strange, hypnotic, and almost impossible elegance. A liquid grace that was unlike anything audiences had ever seen in a horror film before. That strange and haunting beauty came directly from the man inside the underwater suit, Ricou Browning. A champion diver, a professional swimmer, and a Florida native, Browning brought something to the role that no one had ever seen in the horror genre before: a sense of pure, aquatic artistry. He didn't swim like a man in a rubber suit pretending to be a monster. He swam like something that was truly born in the depths, something ancient, powerful, and completely effortless. Every slow, deliberate turn of his body, every graceful and inquisitive reach of his long, webbed hands felt more like a haunting and beautiful underwater ballet than a simple monster chase. To capture this powerful illusion of a truly aquatic being, Browning performed all of his scenes in the clear waters of Wakulla Springs, Florida, completely without the aid of any air tanks, relying entirely on his own incredible and almost superhuman lung capacity. He would vanish beneath the surface, hold his breath for minutes at a time, and then silently and gracefully drift into the frame, holding perfectly still so that no telltale air bubbles would rise to the surface and ruin the shot. The camera crew on the film said it was an eerie and almost supernatural thing to witness. His unique and beautiful movement became the creature's very soul, and it would go on to inspire generations of filmmakers for decades to come. Florida's crystal clear springs became the murky and dangerous Amazon. The movie may claim that its terrifying story takes place deep in the muddy, dangerous, and almost inaccessible jungles of the South American Amazon River, but the real, physical Black Lagoon was actually located in the bright, warm sunshine of Florida. All of the film's stunning and iconic underwater sequences, those haunting, shimmering shots of the Gill-man drifting silently and gracefully beneath the swimmers on the surface, were filmed in Wakulla Springs and Silver Spring, two of the clearest and most beautiful natural bodies of water in the entire United States. Their almost supernatural, crystal-clear transparency gave the cinematographers the unique ability to create the powerful and convincing illusion of an endless, deep underwater world, with bright, dramatic sunlight slicing through the depths like liquid glass. It was the perfect and perfectly safe disguise for the dangerous and murky Amazon. There were no real snakes, no piranhas, just a beautiful and prehistoric calm that looked almost too perfect to be real. Still, filming in these springs was anything but easy. The professional divers on the crew had to constantly fight against unpredictable and powerful underwater currents. Ricou Browning, inside the heavy suit, risked blackouts by holding his breath for up to 4 minutes at a time. And the underwater camera crew, using bulky and experimental 3D camera rigs, had to meticulously hide every single one of their own air bubbles to keep the powerful and essential illusion of a solitary, non-breathing creature completely alive. The monster suit was a suffocating sauna and a constant physical hazard. Every single time the actor Ben Chapman put on the heavy Gill-man suit for the on-land scenes, he said in later interviews that it was like stepping into a personal, mobile, and suffocating oven. The creature costume, made of thick, non-porous latex and molded rubber, was a single, one-piece suit that trapped all of his body heat, his sweat, and even the actor's own breath inside, creating a dangerously hot and almost airless environment. On the hot Hollywood sound stages, under the blinding and incredibly powerful studio lights of the era, Chapman's internal body temperature would skyrocket so fast that production assistants had to be on hand at all times to douse him with buckets of cold water between takes, just to prevent him from passing out from severe heat exhaustion. He couldn't sit down in the suit as it would bend the rubber fins out of shape. He couldn't see properly through the tiny, fogged-up eye holes. And he could barely hear the director's instructions through the thick latex cowl. For long, agonizing stretches of the filming day, he would just have to stand there, slowly cooking inside the suit, trying not to faint while waiting for the next cue. But the suit didn't just torture Chapman. It was a physical hazard to everyone around him. During one crucial scene, where he is carrying the unconscious Julie Adams through the tight and narrow, plaster-walled cave set, he misjudged his footing in the dim light and accidentally and violently scraped her head against the hard rock wall. Luckily, she wasn't seriously hurt, but the moment captured just how physically punishing and dangerous the shoot really was. The underwater ballet was performed by a secret stunt double. That ethereal and unforgettable underwater ballet sequence between the creature and the beautiful scientist Kay Lawrence remains one of the most haunting and strangely beautiful images in all of 1950s cinema. But it wasn't the film's star, Julie Adams, who was gliding so gracefully through the lagoon's waters. The woman you see floating just above the Gill-man's shadowy form was actually Ginger Stanley Hallowell, a professional swimmer and one of Hollywood's pioneering female stunt performers, who doubled for Julie Adams during all of the film's demanding and dangerous underwater scenes. Filmed in the clear but cold waters of Wakulla Springs, the sequence looks like a slow-motion and almost romantic waltz between a predator and his prey, or perhaps between a lonely being and the object of his curiosity. Every graceful turn of her body, every gentle and inquisitive brush of his long, webbed claws told a silent and powerful story that the dialogue in the film never could. The filming of this beautiful sequence, however, was anything but graceful. Hallowell had to perform almost completely blind, wearing a thin, white bathing suit in cold spring water with very limited visibility. Ricou Browning, in the full creature costume, had to approach her from below, also without goggles, relying purely on memory and instinct to hit his marks. One single misstep and he risked slamming into her, or losing his precious and limited supply of air. But somehow, in a moment of pure movie magic, it all clicked. Star. Julie Adams was genuinely terrified of the creature. On and off the set, the actress. Julie Adams may have played the film's brave and resourceful heroine, but she famously wasn't acting when she looked terrified of the water. Off camera, she openly admitted to the cast and crew that the very idea of swimming in Florida's murky and unknown waters absolutely terrified her. The thought of unseen creatures lurking just beneath her feet, snakes, alligators, who knew what else, was enough to make her freeze with genuine fear. When the director, Jack Arnold, asked her to enter the real lagoon for some shots, she flatly refused for several takes, until her brave stunt double, Ginger Stanley, had to step in and do the more dangerous work. Even on the safe Hollywood soundstages, Adams couldn't shake the deep unease of filming beside a man in a rubber-clad monster suit that looked a little too real in the dim, atmospheric light. During the shooting of the film, her real-life fear found its way directly into her powerful on-screen performance. When Ben Chapman, as the creature, would reach for her, her panicked reactions weren't always staged. They were often genuine. She later recalled moments where she had to actively remind herself, "It's just a movie. It's just Ben in a suit." Even as the cold water closed around her and those long, webbed claws brushed against her skin, that raw and undeniable authenticity is what gave the film its powerful and believable pulse. The creature's iconic look was designed by a woman whose credit was stolen. The Gill-man's brilliant and enduring design, those wide, black, almost sad eyes, the ripped gills, and the strange reptilian grace didn't come from a studio committee or the gruff male head of the makeup department. It came from the mind and the pen of Millicent Patrick, a brilliant and pioneering female artist and animator who had once worked at Disney on films like Fantasia, before joining Universal's legendary makeup and creature department. It was Patrick's elegant and detailed sketches that gave the creature its unmistakable and unforgettable silhouette, a perfect and eerie blend of amphibian anatomy with something strangely and hauntingly human. She was so proud of her creation that the studio even sent her on a promotional tour for the film, where she was billed as the beauty who created the beast. That is, until her own boss, the head of the makeup department, Bud Westmore, a man from a powerful Hollywood family, reportedly became jealous and decided he didn't like sharing the spotlight. He ordered the studio to erase Patrick's name from all publicity materials, and he took sole credit for the creature's design himself. For decades, history completely forgot her crucial contribution, and her name vanished from Universal's official records. It wasn't until film historians in the early 2000s uncovered internal studio memos and old promotional photos that Millicent Patrick's essential role as the true creator of the Gill-man was finally and rightfully unforgettable music that defines the monster went uncredited. Every single time the creature appears on screen in the film, 3 piercing, dissonant, and terrifying notes of brass slash through the silence. It's a sound so primal and so effective that it feels like fear itself surfacing from the depths. That terrifying shriek of brass became one of cinema's most recognizable and iconic monster themes, right up there with the famous screech of the violins in Psycho. But here's the twist and the injustice. The composers who were behind that iconic theme never got their proper due. The creature's unforgettable musical motif wasn't written by one single person, but was a collaborative effort by 3 of Universal's uncredited staff composers: Hermann Stein, Hans J. Salter, and a very young Henry Mancini. Years before, he would write his famous Pink Panther theme. At the time, the Universal studio system treated its music department like an assembly line, often recycling musical cues from film to film and rarely giving individual credit. None of the composers were officially credited for their specific contributions, even though their combined and brilliant work literally gave the Gill-man his terrifying heartbeat. That sharp, 3-note musical sting was what turned a simple man in a rubber suit into something truly alive and menacing. It warned the audience that the monster was coming, even before they saw him. A Hollywood legend was born from a dinner party ghost story. The creative seed for Creature from the Black Lagoon didn't come from a studio brainstorming session or a science fiction novel. It came from a ghost story, whispered over wine and cigarettes at a glamorous Hollywood dinner party. In the early 1940s, the film's producer, William Alland, attended a dinner party hosted by the legendary director Orson Welles. Among the esteemed guests was a Mexican cinematographer named Gabriel Figueroa, who told the party a strange and eerie legend from his travels in the Amazon. The legend was about a race of half-human, half-fish people who were said to live in hidden lagoons and would occasionally surface to kidnap young maidens from the nearby villages. The powerful and primal image of these fish people stuck in William Allen's mind like a haunting. Years later, while working as a producer at Universal, he dug out his old notes, which he had simply labeled the Sea Monster, and the idea for the Gill-man began to take its final shape. From that single, almost drunken tale, grew one of cinema's most enduring and original creatures. Allen and the screenwriter, Harry Essex, spun the simple myth into a work of science fiction, replacing ancient curses with modern evolution and giving the old legend a new and powerful tragic pulse. It turns out the creature didn't crawl from a swamp. He crawled out of a story told in the dark at a Hollywood party. The film was shot and released in true, polarized 3D. When Creature from the Black Lagoon hit theaters in 1954, audiences didn't just watch it, they ducked. In a desperate attempt to compete with the new and growing threat of television, Universal released the movie using a state-of-the-art dual-strip polarized 3D system. This involved projecting two separate reels of film simultaneously through synchronized lenses onto the screen. Viewers in the theater wore special polarized glasses, not the flimsy red and blue paper kind, to experience monsters, claws, and bubbles that seemed to be leaping straight from the screen and into the audience. For many kids in the 1950s, it was their first taste of true, immersive cinematic technology, and their very first reason to spill their popcorn in sheer terror. But pulling off this gimmick wasn't easy. The cameramen had to wrestle with bulky, heavy, and incredibly complex 3D camera rigs that were the size of refrigerators. Every single underwater shot had to be meticulously and painstakingly recalibrated for the correct stereoscopic depth. Even Ricou Browning's graceful underwater movements were carefully designed to accentuate the 3D illusion, with his arms extending menacingly toward the lens and his long, webbed claws reaching just past the audience's noses. Most 3D films of the era have since faded into a forgotten novelty, but Creature from the Black Lagoon proved that, when used artfully, the format could feel truly and terrifyingly alive. Guillermo del Toro's dream remake finally came true, sort of. As a young boy growing up in Mexico, the future Academy Award-winning director Guillermo del Toro didn't see the Gill-man as a simple monster. He saw him as a tragic, misunderstood, and almost romantic figure. To him, the real tragedy of Creature from the Black Lagoon wasn't the horror, it was the heartbreak of the creature's impossible love. So, when he became a famous filmmaker, Del Toro pitched a bold and passionate remake to Universal Studios. His idea was to tell the same story, but this time, entirely from the creature's point of view. In his version, the monster and the woman wouldn't just share a brief, strange connection. They would truly fall in love. The studio, however, passed on the idea, reportedly telling him that audiences wanted screams and horror, not a strange interspecies romance. Del Toro seemingly left that dream behind. That is, until decades later, when he essentially built his own lagoon. His 2017 masterpiece, The Shape of Water, carried the exact same thematic DNA: a mysterious, amphibious creature, a lonely and fragile woman, and a powerful and beautiful love story that defied nature and fear. The difference was that this time, nobody said no. The film swept the Oscars, winning Best Picture and Best Director. What Universal had rejected as too strange became the most celebrated fantasy of its time. Del Toro didn't get to remake the Gill-man story. He finally gave him the beautiful and triumphant ending he deserved. The creature's powerful and enduring legacy refused to sink. Decades after his first terrifying splash on the big screen, the Gill-man still casts a long, dark, and powerful shadow over all of Hollywood. He has appeared or been referenced in everything from the cult classic The Monster Squad to, of course, The Shape of Water. The image of him, the last of his kind, haunting the Amazon, has inspired generations of filmmakers who grew up staring into his wide, glassy, and strangely sad eyes. Universal has tried to resurrect him again and again, through a series of planned but failed remakes in the 1980s, the infamous and failed Dark Universe in the 2010s, and countless other pitches that have never made it past the surface. Yet every single time Hollywood tries to drag him back from the depths, they end up rediscovering the same fundamental truth. You can't really improve on perfection. What made the Gill-man timeless wasn't just the brilliant makeup or the groundbreaking special effects. It was the powerful and tragic emotion at his core. He was the last of the classic Universal monsters to have a real beating heart, a heart that beat even louder than his primal roar. He is more than just a relic of the 1950s. He is a powerful and enduring idea that keeps evolving. The outsider, the misunderstood, the beautiful thing that is feared simply for being different. Every generation sees a part of itself in that iconic, lonely silhouette, emerging from the dark water. From a myth whispered at a glamorous Hollywood dinner table to a creature that would go on to shape decades of cinema, Creature from the Black Lagoon proved that true horror doesn't always come from dark shadows or loud screams. Sometimes it rises slowly and gracefully from still black water, beneath the iconic rubber suit, behind the thick fog machines, and under the shimmering Florida springs. There was real artistry, real danger, and a surprising amount of heart. The film wasn't just another cheap monster flick. It was a powerful and tragic story about beauty, fear, and everything that exists in the murky depths between them. Every generation since has tried to bring the Gill-man back to the surface, but no one has ever truly surpassed the power of the original. Maybe because he's more than just a monster. He's a mirror, reflecting our own fascination with the unknown and our deep-seated fear of what it might say about us. The lagoon may be quiet now, but the powerful ripples he left behind still reach every single corner of pop culture today.